Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, you may press star followed by 1 if you'd like to ask a question. I would also like to inform all parties that today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the conference over to Andy Haight. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So again, my name is Andrew Haight. I'm an economist at the U.S. Census Bureau at our headquarters office here in Maryland. And this afternoon, I'd like to thank you all for taking time out of your busy day and welcome you to this webinar on accessing the 2017 Economic Census on our new data.census.gov platform. To get us started, I want to provide just a little bit of background about our economic programs, and then we'll dive right into the actual demo of the data.census.gov platform with a specific focus on how to access the business data. So as many of you probably already know, the Census Bureau conducts more than just simply the population census every 10 years. We conduct over 130 different monthly, quarterly, and annual programs. These include, of course, the decennial census and the American Community Survey, one of our most detailed and comprehensive demographic household-based surveys that we conduct. We also conduct a census of governments every 5 years. This is a census of state and local government and provides detailed information on the public sector. But most importantly, I guess I'll say for me, we conduct an economic census every 5 years. This is our largest economic program that we conduct at the Census Bureau, and it measures the more than 8 million employer businesses in the United States. So let's talk a little bit about some of those surveys. In addition to the economic census, we also conduct monthly and quarterly surveys, annual surveys, and of course then the economic census. When you're thinking about those three types of business surveys, the truism that I always like to tell people is that the more current the data, the less detailed it is. And the less current the data, the more detailed it is. So for example, our monthly and quarterly surveys are mostly sample type programs. They provide really detailed, very timely estimates, but fairly high level numbers. The annual programs provide a little bit less timely information, but even more detailed data. And finally, that leaves the economic census, providing our most comprehensive data. So let's dive a little bit more into those monthly and quarterly surveys. We conduct 17 different surveys here at Census that are considered these economic indicator surveys. They include national sample type surveys like the monthly retail trade survey, our monthly building permit survey, and the detailed imports and exports data that we publish as part of our international trade program. We also have surveys that are done quarterly, which includes things like the quarterly financial report and our quarterly services survey. Annually, we do 20 different business surveys. These cover, again, national surveys like the annual retail trade program and the wholesale trade program, the services annual survey, as well as administrative programs like County Business Patterns, which publishes data on employer establishments in the United States, and the Annual Survey of Entrepreneurs, which publishes information based upon the race, ethnicity, gender, and veteran status of the business owner. These are great programs, provide annual information. But that then brings us to the economic census. Again, it's our most comprehensive program. We do an economic census every 5 years, and we just finished collection of the 2017 economic census data. On September 19th, next Thursday, we are going to be releasing the very first release from the 2017 Economic Census, our First Look report. This report is going to provide preliminary national level data for all 2 through 6 digit NAICS codes that we cover at the Census Bureau. Data are going to be available only in this new data.census.gov platform, which is exactly why we are doing this webinar today, to walk through how you all are going to be able to get access to that data when it goes available next Thursday. So what kind of data is included in the economic census? It covers nearly every sector of the U.S. economy. The only sector that we currently exclude is agriculture, NAICS 11, because U.S. Department of Agriculture covers that. We also exclude the government sector because, again, we have a separate census of governments. And then there are also a few other exclusions. I've provided here on this slide a link to the site that provides a full list of all of the industries that are excluded from the economic census. The economic census provides some of the most detailed geographic information that we have available at the Census Bureau. Data down to the place level. Historically, we have had data for zip codes. For the 2017 economic census, we will not be publishing zip code level statistics. These data will be available through the County Business Patterns, or specifically the Zip Code Business Patterns program. We also publish data on a variety of other dimensions that are available at the Census Bureau. These include detailed information by business size, by legal form of organization, by franchise status, and by a variety of other cross-tabulation type dimensions. Because it is our most detailed survey, it publishes the most detailed data variables. There's over 200 data variables published in the economic census. These include core statistics like number of businesses, employment, payroll, and sales. These 4 statistics are the ones that are going to be published in the First Look release next Thursday. But we also publish many industry-specific or sector-specific data variables. For example, in the manufacturing sector, we publish detailed information on inventories, capital expenditures, and other types of data like that. We also publish information on product lines, which is a great source of information on the revenue of businesses broken out by the individual products and services that they provide. This slide includes some information about the release schedule for the 2017 economic census. As I just mentioned, next Thursday, we're going to be publishing our very first release as part of the 2017 economic census. It is our First Look report. After that, starting in January, we will have our local area data, what we call the Geographic Area Statistics release. Those data will start coming out in January and will flow all the way through November of 2020. Data are released on a flow basis by sector and by state. So we've provided here on the slide a link to the more detailed schedule that will be updated regularly, telling you what states and sectors have been released so far and what are the ones that are coming in the next 90 days. Now, there are a number of changes for the 2017 economic census, and I'm actually going to point out a few of these when we get into the actual demo of data.census.gov, but I'll mention them now. First, every 5 years, we refresh the geographies that we publish in our economic programs areas. For the 2017 economic census, we're going to be publishing data on the 2017 geographic area basis as opposed to the 2012 basis for the 2012 economic census. There are a number of changes that have occurred. Metropolitan areas, counties, and certainly places. In fact, over 50% of the cities, towns, villages, and boroughs that we publish in the economic census have had some type of boundary change or some type of change since the last economic census. On the slide, I've provided a link to our economic census website where you can learn more about those geography changes. The North American Industry Classification System, or NAICS system, that we use to classify every business also gets changed every 5 years. And there are, of course, some changes for the 2017 NAICS system. Again, I provided a link to that site to learn more about those industry changes. When you're accessing data in data.census.gov, currently, you're going to be using that data on the 2012 NAICS basis. When we start releasing data for the First Look report, you'll be seeing data on the 2017 NAICS vintage basis. And there are some changes, some industry classification consolidations, some split outs, and some sort of many-to-many types of changes. We also publish data on product lines. For 2017, we'll be using the new North American Product Classification System. These products are still under discussion right now, so I provided the link to the page where you can go to learn more about the NAPS changes. And of course, there are many other changes coming as well. I'm going to quickly walk through those, and then we'll get right into the demo. So the first, of course, structural product change is this new First Look release. For those of you who are familiar with our economic program releases before 2017, we always used to release something called the Advanced Report. It was a very, very high-level summary that we released first in the economic census, and then later more updated data superseded that. In this economic census, that Advanced Report has become our First Look, but it does provide more detailed information than what we used to have in the Advanced Report. A fairly substantial change that you will see when we start releasing these data in data.census.gov is some consolidation of the establishment and firm size reports. When we get into the data.census.gov platform, I'm going to highlight a few tables that historically have always been released in separate data sets broken out by sector. So for example, if you were interested in accessing data by employment size of an establishment across 3 different sectors, let's say you were interested in small retail businesses, small manufacturing businesses, and small healthcare businesses, you historically would have had to go to 3 separate data sets in American Fact Finder to access that data. In the new platform, and for the 2017 Economic Census, all 3 of those data sets, in fact, all 18 sector data sets, will be consolidated together into one cumulative file. That'll make it much easier for users to access that data across sectors, and certainly it'll be nice in our new data dissemination platform because you won't have as many data sets to have to choose from to find the data set that contains the information you care about. Similarly, we're making some adjustments to our miscellaneous subject reports. There are some tables that are being dropped, a couple of new adds, and similar to the consolidation of the size reports, we are also similarly consolidating the class of customer, enterprise support, and exported services tables. Certainly, I would encourage you all to check out our Economic Census website to learn more about these really fascinating and interesting miscellaneous subjects tables that provide an amazing wealth of detailed information on selected industries. Well, finally, let's talk about the last few changes, and then we're actually going to get out and start doing something live, showing you how to get to these data. We do have some new disclosure rules or changes to how we are doing suppression of information based upon to protect the privacy of individual businesses. These rules will impact the data that you're going to be seeing in the 2017 Economic Census. I just want to put it out there so you all know to kind of look for those changes. We are changing some of the geographic area data that's being published for this economic census. We will not be publishing city, town, village, and borough level data for the manufacturing sector. We used to publish that data, but again, with these new suppression rules and the implementation of these privacy practices, we are not able to publish the data for the manufacturing sector. Similarly, there may be some other tweaks for the published data for other sectors. Interestingly, the Economic Census of Island Areas, which is the corresponding economic census that covers Puerto Rico, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, the Virgin Islands, and American Samoa, these changes for those islands will mirror these other changes for the economic census. So that brings us to the subject of today's webinar, and that is that we are going to be disseminating these data for the first time only on data.census.gov, our new data dissemination platform. When we think about that transition to data.census.gov, I just want to point out that historically we have disseminated the economic census data in multiple platforms on the Census Bureau's website. This is just 3 of them on this particular slide. QuickFacts, one of our most popular data tools, has had some selected information from the economic census published there. American Fact Finder, of course, has historically always been our primary dissemination place for the economic census data, and we've even had some economic census data in the data tool that I'm responsible for, Census Business Builder. Moving to data.census.gov is consolidating these data into one central enterprise platform that we hope someday will completely supersede all of these other platforms and will make it much, much easier for users to access not only economic census data in one place, but also pull together the demographic data that business users often care about when they're using our information. So let's now get into the actual demo. So in the demo today, I'm going to follow 3 typical use cases that many of our business data users use. So the first use case I'm going to walk through is a very common use case here at the Census Bureau, and that is someone who is interested in a fact or a couple of facts for a single type of business, a single industry, and a single geography. So for example, if I was interested in finding out the number of grocery stores in the United States, that would be the type of fact that we're going to be walking through today. And we're going to be using the main search feature in data.census.gov to answer this very simple but yet important question. The second use case I'm going to be walking through is the user is interested in looking at multiple facts for a single industry, but for multiple geographies. So the typical user of this might be a person from an industry trade group. For example, if I was the president of the Fertilizer Manufacturers Association or the National Grocers Association, I might be interested in finding out information about grocery stores, but for every geography in the United States, every county, for example, in the United States. These types of associations care about their type of business, but they want all the data that we have for multiple geographies for their type of business. The third and final use case I'm going to walk through today is the user who cares about data for a single geography, but multiple industries. This would be, for example, a person from a regional planning authority or a chamber of commerce. So for example, if I was the president of the Southern Maryland Chamber of Commerce, I would be interested in looking at all of the businesses that are in my 3-county area or my 1-county area, okay? They're not interested in just a single type of business, but all the businesses in there. In this third use case, I'm also going to walk through a couple of the data tools that the new data.census.gov platform offer. These include the ability to customize the table that you're viewing, which includes the ability to change the geography, to change the NAICS code or codes that you're viewing, to download and print and share, and to actually view data notes. And finally, very quickly, I'm going to show the real power of data.census.gov in these new data profiles. These profiles that aggregate together demographic and business data for a particular use. So let me get out of my PowerPoint here and bring us out to the Census Bureau's homepage, www.census.gov. To get to data.census.gov, I'm going to go to my the browser, and I'm just going to type in, let me get over here, data.census.gov. You can see I've been here before, and that'll bring us to the new data.census.gov main page. So for our first use case today, we're interested in looking at a single particular fact. So let's just pretend I wanted to find out how many grocery stores are there in the United States. I could go to the search box here where it says I'm looking for, and I could type in the word grocery, and the application is then going to bring me back a list of keywords associated with the word, or a bunch of categories associated with the word I typed in. The very first industry, 4451, NAICS code 4451, is the industry that I'm interested in, so I'm going to go ahead and select that. And the application is going to immediately come back and bring me back some statistics about the industry that I selected. Now you'll notice that the very first table, a preview of the very first table that is presented, is the data for non-employer statistics, not the economic census. The data that are presented here are presented in order of release. So the latest updated information always will float to the top, and the non-employer statistics report is the latest data for that industry that was available. Well, we're not interested in data from the non-employer statistics program. We're interested in finding out that information from the economic census. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to click on the word filter, and that's going to bring me up a list of filter options. From there, I'm going to go to surveys, and then I'm going to scroll through this list of programs that provide information at the Census Bureau until I get down to the line for Economic Census U.S. Basic Data, and I'm going to make a selection on there. Now here's a quick note about the data for 2012 versus the data for 2017. In the 2012 economic census, we assembled all of the basic information available from across all the sectors, all industries, and all geographies into something called the EWOX file, the Economy-Wide Key Statistics file. This essentially is the file that I'm selecting now, is that 2012 vintage particular file. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select that basic data, and now I'm going to hide the filter, and now right away I can see that for NAICS 4451 in 2012 there were 92,849 grocery stores in the United States. When the data comes back, you can see that we have this preview, but if I wanted to view all of the tables, I could either click this button that says View All Tables, or I could just click on the tab at the top that says Tables, and I now get a more comprehensive view versus the preview that we just looked at. Now you'll notice there's actually two data sets from the 2012 economic census that provided information on grocery stores. The first of them is that EWOX file, that Economy-Wide Key Statistics file. The second one, though, is a separate data set that provided information for the retail trade sector. So looking at the data that was available in EWOX, we can see it includes things like the number of establishments, sales, annual payroll, etc. I can scroll through all of these particular tables and to get to those values. The retail trade file included just data for retail trade, which does include some of the same data that was available in that EWOX file, but there's also some additional data variables. For the 2017 economic census, we will not be publishing these separate sector-based geographic area tables like we have here. These data will all be consolidated into this new EWOX file. So it'll be much easier. You won't have to know, well, which is the right table for me to go to get the specific data that I'm interested in. So this has done a great job of answering that single question that we had. How many grocery stores are there in the United States? To now go to our second use case, we're going to click on the Census Bureau's logo here in the upper left-hand corner, and that'll bring us back to the main data.census.gov homepage. So for our second situation, we want to find the data for a single industry, but this time for multiple geographies. So like before, well, not like before, excuse me. To do that, I'm going to use the advanced search. So I'm going to click on the advanced search option, and I can go in now and I can choose codes, and I could choose industry codes, but I would then have to know which industry, what sector of the U.S. economy the industry that I'm interested in is located in. I would have to choose, for example, retail trade to then be able to get down to the specific industry for grocery stores, which is the industry that we're going to be interested in again. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to once again type in grocery up here in the advanced search box. Once again, I'm going to be presented with a list of industries that are associated with that particular word. Once again, I'm going to choose grocery stores, and now I'm going to click search. And just like before, we're back to looking at it, a preview of the non-employer statistics table and the ability to get down and actually filter to the data specifically for the economic census. So let's now show how are we going to get to those detailed geographies. So I'm going to go to Filter, and now I'm going to go Geography. I'm going to choose County, and now I'm going to choose all counties within the United States. So when you think about the typical trade association user, they're interested in knowing about all of the geographies, all of the states, all of the counties, all of the cities that their business, that their types of business covers. So we're going to choose the all counties of the United States. However, if I was interested in looking at just all the counties within a specific state, I could scroll down further, choose one of those states, and then either select individual states from the list or select all counties within that state. But for the purposes of today's demo, I'm going to stick with all counties in the state, And now when I hide this menu, you can now see we're seeing a preview of the table showing every county in the United States. Now I'm going to go ahead and go into the regular table view so we can see some of the other features that are available here in this tool. So let's now say we want to just look at just the economic census tables, not these non-employer tables. Just like before, I'm going to go back to Filter. I'm going to go to Surveys. Once again, I'm going to choose the economic census from this long list of different programs that we publish. Here's our basic data. And now when I hide this, I'm now going to be looking at two tables, one from the Economic Census EWOX file, one from Retail Trade. Again, we're going to be getting rid of that second table for the 2017 Economic Census. But now we're seeing grocery stores for every single county in the United States. Okay? A really nice way to go in and actually get all that detailed data. Let's now change gears one more time and go to our third use case. So again, I'm going to click on the Census Bureau logo. Once again, I'm going to click on the Advanced Search option. But this time, I'm now going to want to look at data for a single geography, and I want to look at all of the industries within that single geography. I could, of course, click on Geography, choose the type of geography I'm interested in, and make my way down through that option. But I want to quickly show you how you can get to the geography you care about just by using the search box. So when I click on the search box, the application is going to allow me to go in. It's being a little bit slow, I guess, here today. Oh, there it goes. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, let's try this again. Advanced search. And this time I'm going to type in Ann for the name of the county that I'm interested in this case, Anne Arundel County, Maryland. I can go ahead and choose Anne Arundel County, Maryland from the menu and click Search. And the application is now going to bring back all of some selected data about Anne Arundel County, Maryland. Now, if we scroll through this list of these preview tables, we would see that the vast majority of the information that's presented here is demographic type information about Anne Arundel County, Maryland. What is the total population? What is the breakout of that population by age and by race, and et cetera? We have all that information. We are interested in looking at the business data for this case. So I'm going to go back to my filter. Once again, I'm going to choose codes, and I'm going to choose NAICS, in the industry codes. And this time, I'm going to click on all available codes. This is going to allow me to go in and look at every single code that we publish data for Anne Arundel County. When I then hide my menu, I can now see I have from NAICS 00 all the way through NAICS 811999, the very last code that we publish detailed data for. Okay? So this is giving me every single code that I particularly care about. Now, in this case, we are actually not interested in looking at every single NAICS code, but we really are interested in looking at the NAICS codes that are within a particular sector of the economy. So I'm going to go back to my table view just so we can see the complete table view. And I now want to go back to that filter, and I want to uncheck all NAICS codes. And now I want to scroll down, and I want to get all of the healthcare related NAICS codes. So if I choose healthcare, I can now go in and actually select all of the codes that are within the healthcare sector. To do that, I do need to select each of these boxes here at the top. I want the 2-digit NAICS code, I want all the 3s, all the 4s, all the 5s, and finally all of the 6-digit NAICS codes. Once I've now done that, I can now hide my menu, and now as you see, I'm now looking at not the data for every single 2 through 6-digit NAICS code for the entire economy, but I'm looking at just the healthcare sector within Anne Arundel County, Maryland. Okay, so that's now brought us to where we actually could do that. The last little filter I want to do is, once again, I want to choose our surveys. I want to go back and choose the economic census so we can again get to those specific data files from the economic census. I'm going to apply that filter, and now we're actually going to be looking at that one particular table from the Economic Census, from the EWOX file. Again, we have a separate file for the healthcare sector. Again, that file will be consolidated into that one large table for 2017. So that essentially is the three main use cases that I wanted to showcase in this afternoon's demo. What I now want to walk through is some of the customizing features that are available in data.census.gov that make it easier for users to manipulate this data now that we've gone in and done this. So the very first thing that I want to show is how would we go ahead and change the geographies that we have chosen here. So far we're looking at just a single county, Anne Arundel County, Maryland. But let's say I wanted to add Prince George's County, Maryland to my menu. I want to see data for both of those two counties. No, you don't have to go back to the start and start all over again and reselect those geographies. I can do it right here from the table by using the Customize Table button. When I do that, I now get a menu bar across the top of the application. The very first option that is highlighted in blue is Geography. So I'm going to click on the one geography, and now I'm going to go back to a similar sort of menu. I'm going to choose County. I'm going to scroll down here. I'm going to choose Maryland. I can see the Anne Arundel County is still selected. I could uncheck it if I didn't want to look at that data, but now I can go in and I can actually choose a second county or a third county or a fourth county. And when I now hide that menu, now I'm going to see two geographies, and I'm going to see all of the healthcare data that we have for both Anne Arundel County and Prince George's County, Maryland. Okay, just taking a second just to refresh this here. Okay. Once that finishes refreshing, then we'll be able to see the full data. There we go. So now we're looking at data for Anne Arundel County and Prince George's County, Maryland. So these first three rows is NAICS 62, Anne Arundel. The next three rows is Prince George's County. Okay. The second thing I want to do is, well, I changed my mind. I don't want to look at Anne Arundel and Prince George's County for healthcare. I want to look at Anne Arundel and Prince George's County specifically for the professional, scientific, and technical services. So I want to change the NAICS codes that I'm looking at to do a different sector of the economy. Once again, I don't have to go back to the main menu and select this all over again. Instead, I can just go to this 5 codes menu, click on codes, go back to my NAICS code menu, go back to 54, which is my sector I'm interested in. I want to add each of these 5 categories, the 2-digit, the 3-digit, the 4-digit, back here again, the 5-digit and the 6-digit NAICS code within NAICS Sector 54. I do want to go in and now uncheck the healthcare industries I already selected. I could go back to this menu over here in the middle and choose healthcare, but even easier, I can just scroll down a little bit here in my menu, and at the very bottom of the page, there we go, is each of the filters that I have selected. So I want to go in and I want to get rid of all of these ones that are related to NAICS 62. So I can uncheck all of the industries that I've chosen that were related to NAICS 62. As I uncheck them, they're going to be removed from my menu. Just taking a second to go ahead and do this. Okay, there we go. Do that. Just taking a second for a second. So I can go ahead and actually clear out all of the ones that I'm not interested anymore. And once I'm finished removing all the ones that I don't need, let me do one more here. Get rid of that one. So now we are just looking at the data just for NAICS 54. And when I now hide the menu, now I've switched from NAICS 62 to NAICS 54 and all of its 3, 4, 5, and 6-digit NAICS codes. Okay. So in looking at this table, you can see there is a column over here that says Meaning of Tax Status Code. For many of our economic census programs, we publish data on additional dimensions. So in the case of NAICS 54, Professional, Scientific, and Technical Services, we break out those businesses into two further categories. Businesses that are exempt from federal income tax and businesses that are subject to federal income tax. Now, a lot of our data users love that tax status breakout. They want to be able to see, out of all of those businesses, how many of them are tax exempt. But for users who don't need that additional detail, they would want to be able to go in and actually get rid of those two extra lines and just have the data for the totals, the all establishment totals. The way you do that in data.census.gov is by going to the filter. So if I go up here to the very top and I choose filter, the application is now going to allow me to go in and further filter this data above and beyond the ways that I already filtered it by geography and by industry. So in this case, I'm going to choose this menu over here on the left-hand side. I'm going to open this menu up here. As it does that, being a little bit slow. Okay, there we go. And here's our column that we care about, meaning of tax status code. So I'm going to choose meaning of tax status code from that menu. Then once I've done that, hold on a second, let's go ahead and get that one. Then I'm going to go over here to my menu and I'm going to choose equal to. And then finally, the last option that I'm going to put in is all establishments, which is the title of that column that I care about. So I want to go in and I want to find from that particular column all of the rows that say the words all establishments in that particular column. Once I'm done doing that, I want to add that filter. And when I then scroll down and I want to apply the updates, now the application is going to update and only those rows that are the totals are going to show up in the particular table. When I apply the update, I can now go back and hide it here, and it looks like something happened here. We lost our particular row. Okay, so let me just do that quickly again. So meaning of tax status code equals all establishments. I've added the filter and now I want to apply those updates. And once I apply the update, we should then see and hide the filter. Now we see we're only looking at the totals, the all establishment totals for that particular option. Okay, so now that we have further limited this data to just show the all establishments total, there's really no reason to now have this meaning of tax status code column in this table anymore. I might as well get rid of it. It's not adding any additional value. The way I would do that is by going to the hide option, and then I can uncheck meaning of tax status. And now when I hide that column, now you can see that that tax status column is actually gone. Okay, so we've now created this really nice table showing data for the healthcare and professional, scientific, and technical services sectors for Anne Arundel and Prince George's County. I now want to go in and actually download this data so I can further manipulate it. The way I would do that is by clicking on, of course, the download button, and I now have a couple of options to be able to download that data. If you wanted to print the data that you are trying to download, that you want to be able to print this table, would be the way you'd want to do that. You'd want to download the data and then print the table from Excel, let's say. Right now, you'll notice that the print and share buttons are both grayed out. Now, along with all of this data, we also include notes about the data. And a lot of times there's some really good, valuable information about the data available in those table notes. The way you view them is by clicking on the Data Notes tab, and now you get this nice long list of all of the different notes about this particular program, this particular data set. It does include some contact information that is really nice. Now, the last point I want to make about these tables is you will notice that there is a map feature or a map tab here option across the top. The application, data.census.gov, does allow the user to actually map the information that they're viewing in the table. This feature is implemented for our demographic programs, but right now it is not, does not work completely for our economic programs. That feature is coming soon, just to give you an idea of what's available. So the last thing I now wanted to do in terms of our demo today is to show you those geographic profiles that I had mentioned before that I kind of feel are really nice. The way that you get to those geographic profiles is by typing into the I'm looking for search box the name of the area that you're interested in studying. I'm going to go back to my hometown, my home county, Anne Arundel County, Maryland. And when I choose Anne Arundel County, Maryland, I get a really nice profile of Anne Arundel County, Maryland. I get some basic demographic information on the number of people and population that's in that particular county. I get some breakouts on the race and ethnicity, some information on the family and living arrangements, on the health of that area in terms of home health insurance, etc. One of the options here under the profiles is the business and economy option over here on the left-hand side. Clicking on that, the application is now going to go in and it's now going to give me data in this nice profile specifically for the businesses in Anne Arundel County. The data that are available in the profiles are from 3 sources. This first graphic is from data from the County Business Patterns Program. Below there is data from our survey of business owners, and finally below there is data from the Economic Census. As the 2017 Economic Census data start being released, and as we start publishing data by geography, these 2012 vintage data will be updated to the new 2017 vintage. I did want to point out that if you wanted to save where you were with these reports, you can use the share button, share export button. Clicking on that will then allow you to be able to see the URL. I could copy this URL here and then come back to it, and it would allow me to come right back to this exact same chart. But of course, I could always just simply copy the URL in data.census.gov, share that with a colleague, and then when they click on that particular URL, it'll bring them right back to the complete profile. Okay, so that essentially is the summary of what I wanted to cover in today's webinar. We're going to now take questions from users. Let me get out of here real quick and get back over to my PowerPoint, and let's see if we have any particular questions. Operator, can you see if we have any questions from the audience?
Thank you. We will now begin the question and answer session. If you'd like to ask a question, please press star followed by 1 on your phone and record your name clearly. One moment while we wait for the first question. We do have our first question. The caller did not record their name, but your line is open.
Do you have a question?
Our next question comes from Catherine. Your line is open.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
can
I
you
can.
hear me? Okay, can you make this the data, you were showing an example of county data. Can you make it specific to city data?
Yes. So in the economic census, well, maybe I'll start again. So at the Census Bureau, we publish data on cities, towns, villages, and boroughs using a couple of different terms. Place is the most common term that we use to define those types of geographies. And when I was going through the demo, you might have noticed that one of those geographic options that was available was the word place. That's where you can go in and actually select specific cities, towns, villages, boroughs, etc. We do have a few other flavors, if you will, of place. One of them is called a minor civil division. They're very common in the New England states. Townships, for example, are considered minor civil divisions. The one little note that I'll tell you about place-level data from our business programs, and specifically the economic census, is, first of all, we only recognize in the economic census cities and towns and villages and boroughs that have at least 2,500 population. So if the place you're interested in has less than 2,500 population, the data would be shown. It just would be grouped into a broader category called balance of county, which is essentially the rest of the county when you take out the cities and towns that we do recognize. But as long as your geography has at least 2,500 population, yes, that would be covered. The second point I wanted to make is that we only publish place-level data for selected sectors. We don't publish place-level data for every sector of the U.S. economy. So I'll give you an example. If you're interested in retail trade, if you want to know how many grocery stores and shoe stores and department stores and car dealerships, retail businesses are available in your town, in your city, in your place, that data are available. We publish place-level data for retail trade and a number of other sectors. If, however, you're interested in place-level data, city-level data for manufacturing, we would have that data for the 2012 economic census, but we are no longer going to be publishing place-level data for the manufacturing sector for 2017. Again, partially because of those new disclosure rules that we've implemented that are reducing the ability for us to publish really detailed geography. So yes, absolutely, you can get to place-level data.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next question comes from Shane O'Brien. Your line is open.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks for your time today. For the 2017 Economic Census Plan data product release page, will you be hyperlinking those reports as they become available, or?
So there is the ability to link from outside of data.census.gov into the data.census.gov platform. We're still working on the navigation of how to get from the Economic Census website over to data.census.gov, but that's a great suggestion. At the end of the presentation, as you can see up on the slide right now, is my email address and phone number. If you want to send me an email, Shane, of specifically what types of links you might be interested in, that would be great to hear.
Okay, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Our next question comes from Jim Moran. Your line is open. Excuse me, Juan Lopez, excuse me.
Yes, I would like to know, you said that you still have the 2012 census data and we could compare to 2017 with the exception of the manufacturing, correct?
Correct. Yeah, in data.census.gov, we will have data for both 2012 economic census and the 2017 economic census, both available in the tool. And the tool does allow you, the platform does allow you to be able to pull data across multiple vintages, multiple years, and then download that information and do that sort of comparison. There has been some talk about future functionality of allowing you to do that comparison side by side right inside the application. That's probably something that we might consider doing in the future, but for right now, the data would still be available. Data prior to 2012, the 2007 economic census, 2002 economic census, etc., those older data sets are only going to be available for download via FTP or via our API. But yes, we will have 2012 and 17 data will both be available in data.census.gov.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next question is from Jim Moran. Your line is open.
Hi, good presentation, Andy. Thanks. I have two quick questions. One, a clarification on manufacturing and geography. Place means cities, towns, villages, and boroughs. So those are not going to be available for manufacturing.
That is correct.
Because of confidentiality and such. How about counties and states?
Yeah. States and counties, definitely. Yeah, and metros for that matter as well, too.
Oh, and metros. Okay. Good,
Yep.
good. And then the next question, when can we see the new 2017 NAICS industry codes, just to kind of get familiar with them and see the difference between them and 2012?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in the PowerPoint portion of the presentation, I did have a link to our NAICS website that you can go to. On that site, we have not only the full list of all of the 17 codes, but we also have concordance tables that relate the 17 codes backward to 2012 and the 2012 codes forward to 2017. So you can actually see that linkage. The last thing I would then say, Jim, and it's a way off before we get there, but one of the data sets that we release as part of the economic census is something called the bridge tables. Those concordance tables that are available on the NAICS website tell you about the change in the code and the information and how those codes are comprised, but they don't tell you anything about the magnitude of that change. So let me give you an example. If you looked at the concordance tables, one of the NAICS changes that is happening for this 2017 system is we historically have had separate NAICS codes for household laundry equipment manufacturers, cooking equipment manufacturers, refrigeration equipment manufacturers, and I want to say there's a fourth one. I'm having a brain cramp now on what they were. But we had separate codes for companies that manufacture dishwashers and refrigerators and ranges and clothes washers and dryers. We had separate codes for each of those. Because that industry has declined in the United States, where there aren't as many U.S. manufacturers of those products as there used to be, those 5 codes have now all been consolidated into one code called Household Appliance Manufacturing for the 2017 NAICS codes. When you look at the concordance tables, it shows that 5-to-1 consolidation. But when you look at that one code, knowing how much of that new one total came from each of the 5 pieces, there's no data, if you will, associated with the concordance tables. The bridge report that we will release much later, it's over a year from now, will actually show that bridging that allows you to look at the share of an industry accounted for by the pieces that it came from. It's a really great table. The comparative and bridge reports together allow you to do that linkage of data over time, which is very helpful when you're doing time series comparisons of the data. I'm somewhat happy to tell you there are very few changes in NAICS. That one that I just mentioned, the household appliance, is just one of them, but there's really not that many changes. So the vast majority of our NAICS codes are completely comparable 2012 to 2017.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Our next question comes from Bob Adler. Your line is open.
Hi, good afternoon. I have a pretty specific question. I happen to be in Maine, and when you talk about metro areas where you can get data that's accessible, including by manufacturing, how small do metro areas get per your definitions?
Okay.
And the reason I ask is the biggest city in Portland has 66,000 people, and so there are metro areas that up here would be considered, economic hubs, but the populations of those particular cities might be less than 10,000.
Right. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a question I hear a lot from smaller states like Maine or even gigantic, physically large states like Montana or New Mexico, but that are relatively small in terms of their populations and their businesses. So a couple of things. First, in the PowerPoint file, I did provide a link to our geographies page off of the Economic Census website, where you can get information about all of the different geographies we publish in the Economic Census. These include metropolitan areas. We follow the OMB standard on what is a metropolitan area, and there's actually a couple of different versions, if you will. There's something called a combined statistical area. There's metropolitan statistical areas, there's micropolitan statistical areas, and finally there's metropolitan divisions. Each of those different types of metros are all defined by county. So in other words, counties are the components that are added together to form metro areas. And to be considered a metro area, you have to have a certain minimum population, and you have to have a certain percentage of people who are commuting from one particular area into a central city. So you mentioned, Bangor, Maine. If you have enough people commuting into Bangor from the communities around Bangor, Maine, then that area would be considered would qualify to be considered a metro. Now, I mentioned the term metro and micro areas. Yes, Maine actually has more than one metropolitan statistical area. In fact, I think they have 2 metropolitan statistical areas, and I think you also have 2 micropolitan areas. My email address and phone number is here on the slide. If you're interested in learning some more about it, I'd be happy to chat with you about that. But again, I would encourage you to check out that geographies page to learn more about that. It's actually, you're better off than you think you probably are. You definitely have metros in Maine.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Our next question comes from Anthony. Your line is open.
Great demo, Andy. Just a quick question. The zip code patterns, I see that listed on data.census.gov, but there's no data for it. Is that going to be something that's going to be uploaded in the new platform?
So zip code business patterns, as you just said, is the one econ program that we have that does publish data down to zip code area levels. The zip code data are available on an annual basis. 2016, I believe, is the latest vintage that's available right now. The 2017 zip code business patterns data will be coming out, I believe, in December. I have to check with my colleagues to confirm that. But the zip code data should be available in county, or excuse me, it should be available in data.census.gov. I can check into that and get back to you. Again, if you want to send me an email, we can confirm that. I know the data are available in our API because one of the data tools that I'm responsible for, Census Business Builder, we actually pull in the ZBP, zip code business patterns data, into our data tool. So I know the data are available. One little point I will make, since you're bringing this up, is we publish good old-fashioned U.S. Postal Service zip codes in the zip code business patterns data table. Our other programs publish something called a zip code tabulation area, or a ZICTA. There are slight differences between the two, but I just want to point that out, that whenever I talk to users who are interested in the zip level data, I always want to make them aware that yes, we do have data available, just need to be aware that our definition of a ZICTA that we use in the American Community Survey, for example, and our definition in our business data are not exactly the same. They're very close, but not exactly the same. But yeah, I know the data is available. Just I'd have to check to see if it's available in data.census.gov.
Our next question comes from Emmanuel. Your line is open.
Hi.
Hi.
Good morning. We are in the West Coast. It was a great honor with your idea. I really appreciate how you give us some insight on how to navigate this data. But
Great.
Here is my question. How can we know in this data that a mobile company in all these counties are included?
So say that. I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, I will slow down because I have some little say. How can we know that the mobile companies are included in this data? For instance, if you want to know about this county that you come from, which is Anna in Maryland, can we know that, okay, this is an industrial company with a physical presence, and this is an online company that they did not have a physical presence in this county? How can we know that on this data? Okay,
so I'm still having a little bit of difficulty, but let me try to say what I think that you're asking. So the businesses that we publish in the economic census are all what we call employer businesses. These are businesses with one or more paid employees. Those businesses do include both brick and mortar as well as online businesses. In some cases, there's actually a specific NAICS code just for online retailers, Businesses that have no brick and mortar presence at all, and all they are is an online presence. There's actually a specific 6-digit NAICS code just for online retail. For businesses that have both an online presence and a brick and mortar presence, those businesses are primarily classified in the industry that they would be classified in, that they're brick and mortar store. So, for example, a department store that has a brick and mortar presence but also has an online website, their online sales of that department store are captured. They are often, though, not captured specifically as online sales, but actually aggregated into the data for the regular brick and mortar presence. We do have a special survey at Census in our business area called e-commerce, called eStats. It covers data on the e-commerce area, and that might be a good report for you to look at to get an idea of what the total e-commerce is in the United States, broken out by industry. It's a really great report. It's an annual program, only publishes data at the national level, but it does give you that breakout of that. Now, the last little point I just wanted to make, and I want to make sure that, first of all, I answered your question, but again, the economic census covers employer businesses. Those are businesses with paid employees. We don't actually publish data or include data on what we call non-employers, self-employed people. Those businesses are not included in the economic census, but they are included in their own separate survey, non-employer statistics. In fact, when I was doing the demo today of data.census.gov, the very first table that kept coming up was a non-employer statistics table. That covers the 24 million non-employer businesses, self-employed people in the United States. The NAICS breakout is similar for non-employer statistics as it is for employer data. It's not quite exactly the same. There's some industries where it's not possible to be a non-employer. Non-employer hospital is a little scary, just thinking if that's even a possibility. But the data are available. Did I answer your question? I just want to make sure I answered your question.
Absolutely, you did. Really appreciate for that. And the second question, because when you put all this data, there is one column, about 3 columns. Some have G, I, and G. Can you explain what that letter stands for inside this column?
So, okay, so you're talking about me hiding a particular column. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir.
So, when users are interested in looking at the data that we have, sometimes there are columns in the table, there are data variables, there are other things that are shown in that table that they don't need to see in their display. So let's say I was just interested in the number of grocery stores. I may not be interested in the employment data for grocery stores, or I might not be interested in the payroll data for grocery stores, or I might not be interested in the sales data for grocery stores. In the new data.census.gov platform, you can hide, you can actually remove from the display those columns that I don't care about. And it makes it easier sometimes to view the data because you don't have to have a scroll bar across the bottom. You can actually go in and just see the columns that you care about. The tool is nice. It allows you to go in a very Excel kind of a way. It allows you to go in and actually hide the columns that you don't care about.
Good. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
My questions.
Our next question comes from Vince Teeter. Your line is open.
Hello, Annie, and thanks for a great presentation. And this is a good segue because since you mentioned being able to do things in an Excel kind of a way, is it also possible to do things in an Excel way by actually downloading your results into an Excel spreadsheet using the tool? And the follow-up question for that is it possible to aggregate, do some custom aggregation of geographies? For instance, I work for a 5-county workforce development council, and so I can I'm frequently having to download 5 tables. It would be nice if the tool allowed me to choose my counties and download one table?
Right. So a couple of parts to your question. So the first part of the question, remind me again what the first part of the question was about.
Yeah.
Oh, the Excel file. So yes, yeah. Definitely when you click on the download button, when you are viewing a table in the full table view, and you click on the customize table button, one of those buttons across the top of the menu allows you to download the data. When you click on download, it gives you some options about the format of the data that you want to be able to download. And you can then bring that down as a CSV file, which you could then easily upload into Excel and further manipulate the table. And in fact, what I often tell users is use our data tools to create a data set that you're interested in, and then do some of that further manipulation of it in your own separate data tools. Like Excel is really good for doing some things and not so much for doing others. Use the features that are in Excel, download the data from us, and then do that manipulation in Excel. It is nice that data.census.gov has some of those features in the tool itself to kind of save you some of that work in Excel. It's just do some other things. Now, the second part of your question about being able to pull data and aggregate it. So one of the points I was making was that when we are moving into this 2017 economic census, we're trying to reduce the number of separate data tables that users have to download, so that if I was interested in data for 5 counties for a retail industry, and I was interested in data for those same 5 counties for a manufacturing industry, let's say, historically I would have had to go to those 2 separate data sets, a manufacturing data set for the manufacturing data and a retail data set for the retail data. I would have had to download that data and then aggregate it myself manually. In the 2017 economic census, we're going to be consolidating those data sets. So now those 2 separate data sets will now be one. You will now be able to go into data.census.gov, select those 5 counties that you're interested in, and then select both the retail industries and the manufacturing industries you care about, and get one file. So you won't have to deal with that, combining that. I will tell you, as a kind of a data nerd, I love that feature that we're now consolidating data. It just makes it so much easier for users to do what you're trying to do. Now, data.census.gov does not right now, nor do I think they have the plans for allowing you to do that additivity, that aggregation of the data inside the tool. So for example, if I wanted to take a single industry for those 5 counties and I wanted to add up that industry's data for those 5 counties to create a total for those 5 counties, right now the tool does not support that functionality, and I'd have to check with my colleagues to find out if they are planning on building that in. That may be something we might consider in the future. I will openly and honestly tell you, the data tool that I'm responsible for, Census Business Builder, does allow you to do that. You can go in and select the 5 counties you're interested in, and it will do the math for you. The Regional Analyst Edition lets you do that. That type of functionality, I'm hoping that we will build into data.census.gov. Right now, they've done a great job so far getting to where they are today. It's just getting the basic functionality. But yes, you should definitely be able to go in and aggregate the data yourself in Excel.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Shane O'Brien, your line is open.
Thank you very much. Actually, I apologize, Andy, you had referenced the PowerPoint several times, and then I just saw the feed where I can get it a week from now, so I apologize for butting in again.
Oh, no problem at all. No problem at all.
Next question is from Juan Lopez. Your line is open.
Hi. I want to applaud the census, for the good effort that they're doing on the data. And I think you answered my questions about the consolidation. In respect to getting the data, whether by FTP, how would I go about doing that? Is there instructions for that?
There's a couple of different options to actually download sort of bulk data. Like if you need the entire Economic Census First Look data set, you want everything. You want the whole file. In some respects, going into a tool like data.census.gov and selecting that data that way and doing a regular download, that would be a waste of time. My personal suggestion, if you are talking about a bulk data download like that, is to actually go to our API and access the data that way and download it using our API. If you go to census.gov and go to the topics menu, you'll see a topic that says developers. And if you click on that topic for developers, that'll bring you to our developers website where you can learn more about our API and about how you can go in and access it. You will need to request an API key to be able to go in and actually to be able to access that. There's no charge, obviously, for the key. And then you have access to, I think it's almost 300 data sets that we have in the API today. And that'll allow you to go in and download some very, very large data sets. Just be careful what you're doing, because some of them are very, very large. But yes, you can do that. We still do have FTP sites available in some of our data tools. But again, if you need like everything, then perhaps the API might be the best route for you.
Yeah, I do understand data, and it could become a lot, big. So yeah, but thank you. You answered my question, and I thank you again for the effort.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Our next question comes from a caller who did not record their name. Your line is open. Next question is from Emiliano Morales. Your line is open.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much for the presentation. I had a question, and it's related to what some callers have already mentioned. I listened to the webinar in June 20th, just the transition into the new website. Thank you so much for showing how we can get to some of these tables and actually narrow down the searches. But one of the things I was curious about, if you had an update on, is when you download the data, I know that the customizations that one does and the actual website don't actually get translated into the CSV file that we get. So I don't know if you had any updates on if that will be the case, or if the downloads will resemble the way in which American Fact Finder now delivers the data in just an Excel rather than a zip file.
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me actually, I've got a colleague of mine in the room, Tyson Weister. Tyson is like the expert on our platform here. So let me have Tyson actually answer that question for you.
Yes, thanks for your question. So we recently rolled out a new way that you can work with the data off of data.census.gov. The one that Andy showed you today was anywhere you click on the site that says download, whether it's a download link or download button, that is the CSV file that is the same regardless of whatever customizations you have made. However, there's a new option that you can work with the data when you're on the table view and you right-click the table for smaller tables. You can export that to Excel or CSV, and whatever customizations you've made in the table do carry over into the exported file. You can also right-click and copy and paste individual cells in order to carry your customizations over. So a couple different options. Right-click, they do carry over. Download, they give you the same CSV output regardless of how you played around with the table on the site.
Understood. So the best option for those customizations to carry over is just select the entire table, right-click, and copy it into an Excel?
Yes. Yes. Selecting cells, or yes, the right-click and just export the entire table if you truly want the entire table.
Understood. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So you also just brought up something that I will just quickly mention as well for all the attendees. Again, today's webinar is being recorded. My colleagues did another webinar just last week on the data.census.gov platform, and their demo included both demographic data as well as some business data. Today's was just focused on the economic census and the business data that we have. That recording for last week's webinar is posted already. So for those of you who might be interested in looking at some of the demographic data that we have in data.census.gov and how to access that and some of the really nice features, for example, the mapping functionality that I said doesn't work right now for our business data, does work for our other programs, I would encourage you guys to check out that recording. It's available in our Census Academy website on census.gov. If you just go to the topics menu, you'll see Census Academy there. So just to give you a FYI on that, today's webinar will be posted there as well.
Okay, our next question comes from a caller who did not record their name, and your line is open.
Okay. This is Catherine again. I'm not sure why my name is not being recorded, but my last one is, how do we get a copy of the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation?
Right. So on that site where the recording is going to be posted, you should also see the PowerPoint file and the transcript for today's webinar. Both will be posted there at the same time, or should be posted at the same time.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. You also have my email address here on the screen. You're free to email me, and I can email you the file as well.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
No further questions at this time.
Well, again, thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy days to participate in this webinar. Hopefully you found this useful. If you have any other further questions after the webinar is over, again, you have my email address here, andrew.w.haight@census.gov, phone number 301-763-6747. Please feel free to contact me afterwards. And again, the webinar will be available probably in a couple of days, posted, the recording. So thank you so much for your time, and hopefully you will visit our website when the Economic Census data goes live, starts going live next Thursday. So thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you for participating in today's conference. Please disconnect at this time.